Today, Randi Matthews joins us to explore the intersection of storytelling, advocacy, and maternal health from the lens of her feature documentary, Deliver Us, which examines the Black maternal health crisis through the leadership and legacy of Black midwives. Together, we unpack collaborative care, the emotional toll of bearing witness, and how culture, purpose, and mental health shape the future of impactful storytelling. Randi Matthews is a producer, director, and the CEO and founder of Media, where she merges brand strategy, cultural storytelling, and social impact. She is also a fellow of the Producers Guild of America's Power of Diversity program, reflecting her commitment to intentional, purpose-driven storytelling. Her filmmaking reflects a multifaceted lens where strategy, culture, and purpose intersect, all in service of stories that drive understanding and impact. Welcome, Randi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. It's so fun to have a conversation.
Right. I wanted to ask you, so with Media, you've built a company that's been centered around purposeful and narrative-driven work. But you've also shared that being a mother has kind of stretched that mission in a new direction for you. How did that shift in your identity kind of expand your sense of purpose?
It's really interesting because both projects were born out of having my son.
I see what you did.
Yeah, no pun intended. But he really inspired me to start my own business because, you know, especially in corporate America, you reach a lot of ceilings that you can't break through.
Right.
And then you realize how much time you're spending trying to make other people's systems work for you instead of making things work for yourself.
Yes.
So he was the reason why I started getting into the entrepreneurial spirit and doing my own thing. And then similarly for Deliver Us, because coming out of that birth, my birth was pretty traumatic. I had a lot of complications, and I had, ironically, one of the midwives we feature in our film was my doula.
Oh, wow.
And she hadn't gotten her midwifery license at that point, but I really feel like she saved my life. And so coming out of that and meeting my co-producer and co-director, Jenny, I just felt like somebody had to tell these stories because I had no idea, even going into it, that this was as big of a deal as it was. And I feel like a lot of people don't.
Yes.
And so I was like, for the sake of my son and knowing that, like, you know, he saved my life in a lot of ways, but also he is the reason why I exist now. He's really changed the trajectory of like what I do and why I do things.
Yeah, I can see that. I definitely, feel like had a similar experience as far as moving out of corporate and not the freedom kind of being out of that world and like reassessing your priorities. But also, like a difficult birth and all of those kinds of things. And so I really found what you did with Deliver Us so moving because you're tackling both the side of like the need, and the history behind having Black midwives and Black doulas and everything, and also like the crisis, that's happening. So like creating this project, it was 6 years, it was a 6-year-long project, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You're also showing up as a mother, a partner, an entrepreneur, all of those things. What do you feel like that journey taught you about who you are? Is that going to take a minute?
All right.
I mean, I imagine you learned so much, right? Every day you're learning something.
Yeah. I mean, I always say, even today, I'm just like, did I make a film? I mean, if you had asked me 6 years ago, would I finish the film? I don't know that I would have said that I would.
Really?
Because you just have no, and I think this is probably with most things, you don't have an idea of how much it's going to take to make something happen, especially this big. I mean, an 80-minute feature-length film is crazy to do. And a lot of it, we did all the fundraising, we did all of the marketing, we did all of the, we found all of our team independently. We did all of the scene work. I was on every shoot.
Wow. And it was all over the country,
all
too.
All over the country.
So, yes.
We were in Alabama. We were in Phoenix. We were in Chicago. We were in LA.
Yeah.
We were all over. And it took a lot. And so I would like to say that I learned that I feel like you learn how capable you are at every point of a new journey. But to your point, it's like I was still hustling, trying to get new business for my day-to-day job. You know, we're talking today. Got to go pick up my son from school. And like,
yep, know that life.
It's like all the stuff that you don't really take account for because you just naturally do it. You're just like, I got to do these things, and then you add a whole nother full-time job to that. I feel like I really learned how much I'm able to push myself to get things done, and not in a way that's like stressful, but in a way that's like, I realized pretty early on in this project that it was going to be bigger than me. And so it stopped being about a project that I was doing and a project that needed to happen, because I feel like the stories are just so rich and valuable that I felt like no matter what, it has to get made. And I guess I'm the person that's doing it. So.
Well, and that's what I wanted to ask you, kind of connected to that. What kept you motivated? I'm sure as you're like hearing these stories, you're like, oh, people need to know about this. But day to day, when you have all these other things kind of like drawing your attention away, how did you keep your motivation?
Some days it was hard, but I will say the midwives and the mothers that we followed are extraordinary people.
Yeah.
They're amazing. And the more you meet in the industry, in the birth worker industry, they're all so worthy of having their stories told.
Yes.
And I think ultimately at the end of the day, that's what kept me going, because you don't really know or hear about the work and the sacrifices that midwives are making, and yet they're saving your life and bringing babies into the world every day at all hours of the day.
That part.
And night. Yeah. And so I think they kept me going, just like knowing that nobody was really telling their stories like we told their stories in this film.
Yes.
And for them to have a platform and a voice, and then also for Black mothers and Black women to seek out that advocacy and understand what that really means was super important to me. And so I can, like I said, I just think it just became something bigger than a film. It became a mission.
Tell me about like some of the stories. I'm sure, they all stand out. I watched it. It's really moving.
Thank you.
Really incredible work. But some of like the midwives and maybe some of like the moms that you profiled, one that stands out to you that you learned, a lot from, or you just got to witness their journey.
Yeah. I mean, they're all so amazing for different reasons.
Yes.
I think, we spent the most time with the midwives from Kindred Space, LA, because my production partners are all from LA, or we live in LA. And so we spent the most time with them, and just to see and I think we talk about this in the film, they talk about being a midwife as a calling.
Yes. Yeah.
Something that it's undeniable in their spirit, and they just can't not do it.
Yes.
And I think seeing them day to day grow and scale their businesses, not knowing if they would have funding, not knowing if they'd have staff, not knowing like how many of them would be available for births.
Right.
It was one of those things where seeing them was so inspiring, and kind of learning their journey literally in real time. We'd be texting them and like, can we come and film today? What's happening?
Really?
What's going on at the birth center today? And they'd be like, no, we have 7 families. You can't.
Not today.
So wow. It's just a cool journey. Honestly, I feel like I learned so much more about what they're capable of.
Yes.
Even, which I think is also like midwifery is a licensed practice. They can deliver babies without a OBGYN or doctor present. And I don't think a lot of people even realize that.
Yes.
And
yeah, actually, can you give us like a little bit of education? Doulas, midwives, like that whole thing, and like the difference between those and then like an OBGYN that, you might see in a hospital.
Absolutely. So midwifery is the practice of delivering babies. They are medically trained. They can prescribe medicine. They are able to deliver babies without a practitioner, a medical doctor in the room. Doulas are emotional care and support for the mothers. So they are not medically trained. They are not licensed, but they support the mom through birth and all of the things that come with it. So breathing and nutrition and emotional support and all of those things. And there's all different types of doulas. There's birth doulas. There are, lactation doulas. There are whatever. People can, I just talked to someone who had talked about a death doula.
Yes,
There's all sorts of functions of doulas, but they're amazing. But that is their function, to support the mother or the birthing person. And then you have like MDs, OBGYNs, who are surgeons.
Yes.
They're medically trained experts in surgery. And so we say in the film, which is that midwives are the specialists in birth, low risk and normal births.
Yes.
And OBGYNs are specialists in surgery and surgical outcomes. And so I think those are the biggest differences between what each function is.
Okay.
Ideally, they function as a team. So the goal would be collaborative care.
Yes.
Where midwives work with OBGYNs or doulas and lactation consultants, therapists.
That's the ideal.
That is the ideal scenario. Like they don't function by themselves. They're a team caring for the birthing person.
Yes. I would say, as far as history, I learned so much in your film too about how Black women have been, delivering babies for generations, but then also, a lot of discussion about the importance of understanding how our bodies were also exploited so much. And so you go over that in the film, but talk to us a little bit about all of those different understandings of where we've been in this, kind of reproductive journey.
In our early history, midwives were the only way that babies were brought into the world, primarily Black. I guess it depends on also where you live in the world, but in America.
Yes.
And then the Black midwife was eradicated and everything was systematized. Education, medical doctors, degrees, credentials, licensures, all became the norm. And Black midwives were eradicated because the things that they were doing were innate and they were taught and passed down generationally. Yes. And it was looked at as if it wasn't good enough. And so over the years, I think there's been I know there's been a resurgence of midwifery as a practice. In the film, we focus primarily on out-of-home births, so freestanding birth centers. There are also midwifery practices inside of hospitals. There are also full midwifery centers that work in collaboration with doctors, and that's all they do. There's all sorts of different practices around the country. Our film specifically focuses on out-of-home and birth centers. But I think there's a movement in the last probably 5 to 10 years where midwives, but specifically Black midwives, are shouting from the rafters, this has to change. We can't keep losing mothers at the rate that we have been, and have been progressively organizing and galvanizing in their own communities and nationally to say, there's better ways to have birthing experiences, and we need to be the forefront of that.
Yes. Well, and I'm curious about, you're saying people, they want to tell this story. They're realizing that it needs to be told. How have you seen the storytelling and the understanding of things change since you originally started with the film, right? Because I think I see more. I also probably notice it in a different way, being a Black mom, right? But seeing so many stories, and they're mostly stories of people in crisis or pain being ignored and not being taken care of, not being taken seriously. How have you seen the conversations shift since you started this project?
Well, it's interesting because we've seen a lot of projects come and go over the time it has taken us to make this film. And, as it is when you work with anything, people know you're working on something and then they send you the thing. So, did you see this film? Did you see this podcast? Did you see this article? So, we get stuff all the time about different types of programming around, the crisis and, community level things that are happening, midwifery, doulas. So we've seen the gambit. There's been some really beautiful documentaries come out in the time that it has taken us to make ours. And there's room for all stories, because the reality of it is that we're all telling different parts and angles of a much larger story and a much larger historical moment that's happening right now. The thing that Jenny Quantum is my production partner. The thing that we were very intentional about when we started this film is that we wanted to lead with the lens of hope.
Yes.
Because primarily, and you said it to start, most of the programming is rooted in the crisis. And we really wanted to be rooted in a solution and a solution to care.
Yes.
Black midwives, midwifery is not the only solution, but it is a very viable and actively, progressing solution. And so that was something that we wanted to make very clear from the start. We didn't want it to be doom and gloom and, we all know that Black mothers are dying.
Right.
We, of course, educate on that in the film, but we really wanted it to be through the lens of care.
Yeah. I would say you do a really beautiful job with that because you do. I mean, I think I was telling you that, I did tear up, but it was like beautiful parts, right? It wasn't out of despair, and I think that being able to show that it's like there are people, even if you don't see it or even if they're not the stories that are the highlights, there are all these people doing this work every day. And so I think that you really do get that feeling of like hope, but also like people are planning like this is what we need to do next. This is where we're going. And you see people, whether that's like fighting for like legislation and getting more, people into this field. What do you think that the midwives that you talk to, what do you think that they're hoping for the future? What are you hoping for?
Well, I think they want to. So one of the things we touch on in the film is the bodies that govern midwifery care. They're different from state to state.
Yes.
The types of certifications are different from state to state. So I think some regulation around there would be something that I think that they would be hoping for. Obviously, the funding is always an issue. They're still not 100% covered by insurance, if at all. And
why do you think that is, Randi?
I think it's about a bottom line. I think midwifery is a proven, viable way to have a baby, but it also takes money out of the hospital's pocket.
Yes. Yeah.
Specifically, again, the freestanding birth centers that we follow. And so I think, it's money.
Yeah.
Other reasons, but I think fundamentally we could trace it back to money.
Right. I would just say from my personal experience, having had an emergency C-section and getting bills for it years later, yes, I can see that. It is money-making kind of, system in place. And like the sacrifice, though, of that, people not knowing that this is an option for them.
Absolutely.
Or like, so an option in terms of, how it might be for them emotionally, but like actually for saving their lives.
Saving their lives. I think one of the things that we really wanted to come through is the level of care that you get with midwives.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think even I had a birth. I had a doula, but I had a hospital or a birth in a hospital, and I think just in following these mothers and seeing like they're on text change with the midwives. They're asking them about what they ate for breakfast. They are including the entire family. Like, oh, your kids can come to the appointment. Your husband or your partner. They're asking questions and engaging. They're not regulating you to 15 minutes.
Right.
They will come to your house if they need to. They really are invested in you as the birthing person, as the mother, and they're invested in your family and they're invested in your journey, and they want to make sure that you are centered and taken care of throughout your birthing experience.
Yes. I think that you do see that because, you contrast that with like most doctors' visits where it's like, gotta get you in and out, and they're not taking the time most of the time to get to know you because they can't, they got to move on. They got this, another appointment right behind you. And, the way that this was filmed, like you do get to see how close they become with like the entire family and kind of getting to understand them. How do you think that understanding then, spending that time and having that, spending that energy with them, then how do you think that affects then the actual birth?
Yeah, I think trust. You trust that they have your best interest. You trust that they're going to let your family members know what's going on. You trust that they're just caring for you. They're caring for your unborn baby. It's not like I'm on a clock.
Right.
You know, they are monitoring you. They're making sure that you feel good mentally. They're working with, if you bring a doula, they're working with the doula.
Okay.
If you have an OBGYN, like there's something maybe that's extenuating in your birth or something that's high risk, they're in contact with your OBGYN to make sure that like if something happens, they have a direct path to a hospital. Like they're extremely intentional about the care and the birthing process. You'll see in the film, most of their birthing suites are more like home scenarios. There's beds, there's tubs. They use a lot of water therapy. You know, they're letting you walk around. They're letting you have movement. Kindred Space has a garden. You can go and sit outside.
That's amazing.
All of that plays into the experience that you get in your birth and what you remember from your birth and how you bring your baby into the world.
That's interesting. Talk to me about when you say what you remember from your birth, like what is the importance of having that as part of your story?
Well, for me especially, I just remember being traumatized coming out of my birth. I don't remember a ton of it. I remember just it being a very emotional, but not like a joyous emotional occasion for me. And, you know, everybody's birth is different. And there's no guarantee that if you have a birth at a birth center that's just going to be rosy petals and, you know. But I think by and large, at least you feel that you're in a space where people are going to treat you like family. And how you remember that makes a difference.
Yes, I think that's true. I think, you know, like for me, I had these ideas of what it would be like. You know, I was in a hospital, but I had a doula. And I was older, you know, it's like geriatric pregnancy. And at the end of the day, they're like, okay, you got to do emergency C-section. I was like, no. I have my music picked out. I know exactly what I like. No, it's going to be. And they're like, you know, healthy baby, healthy mom. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, that was good. But you're right. It changes your ideas of what it's going to be. And for a while that does sit with you, you know, in a different way. Now it's like, it's fine, you know, whatever years later. On. But, you know, you do imagine like the value of having that from the beginning and having that story and not, you know, feeling like you're in a cold hospital kind of environment, right?
Yeah, it just makes a difference. And, you know, I do want to make the statement that birth centers are not for everybody. They're, you know, some people want hospital births. That's totally fine. There are advocates and wonderful people inside of hospitals as well. It's just, I want to make it clear that it is an option. And it's something that I think if you take it seriously and you have the availability or the resources around you to find a midwife and at least have the conversation to see if that's something that makes sense for you and your family, like it should be welcomed. Yes.
Just as you say, another option. You said the word availability, and I know that is part of the challenge, right? That in some areas, like around the country, there are not that many, you know, doulas, midwives available, or not that many birthing centers. What are kind of some of the patterns you see in different parts of the country that you found from, because I know you were all over, that you saw in your work?
Well, access to funding for birth centers, especially out-of-home birth centers, especially run and owned by Black women, are hard to come by. And it is a struggle. You have to be well-funded. You have to be well-supported. You have to have the resources to find advocates in your community to help you. I mean, Stephanie Mitchell, who's in Alabama, she's in a healthcare desert, she says in the film, and she wants to open a birth center, but the barriers in place to getting her birth center open were so interesting, and there was legislation that needed to be passed. Finding funding was a really tough thing. She had to build a facility, so finding contractors because she's down in the South and, you know, not close to cities. So there's a lot of points of barriers.
But of course, that's where you need her.
That's where you need them, right? That's where you need them. And so it's really a catch-22 because they're out there, but a lot of them are fighting just to get a space or to get momentum or to get funding or to, whatever it is, they're fighting to get out so they can be caregivers in these places that need it so badly. Janine is also one of the midwives from Chicago. She's on the south side of Chicago, which is obviously a large city. The south side of Chicago is primarily Black, but there's one birth center.
Wow, really?
And so she also had to change legislation in order to build her own birth center. So there's just lots of, it's different in every city and every place. A lot of politics play a role. Again, barriers to entry, like getting trained and getting your licensure, you have to have the right people to support you, to sign off on things, and that can be hard to find. So,
we talked a little bit about some of the barriers, due to like with the hospital like system and that kind of thing. What do you think about like as far as all of us, like society, what kind of biases do you think stand in the way of us being more supportive of these kind of centers?
Well, I would say ignorance. We just don't know. We don't know that they exist. We don't know what they are. We're not educated about why they exist or what they would mean for us. I think I always say this when I first started, we're all in group chats with really capable, high-functioning, successful women who have never even heard of a midwife.
Really?
Or don't know, like, why would I go to a midwife when I can just go to the hospital?
Oh, that's so interesting.
I would say lack of education is probably the biggest barrier. And then not understanding the differences between a doula and a midwife. And, people will be like, yeah, I've heard of a doula, which is not what a midwife is. Understanding that they are medically trained and you're not just showing up in someone's office and you're like, let me catch your baby.
Should be fine.
It's good. We're good. So I think it's like a bunch of stuff that we're hoping that this movie will help to kind of fill in some of those gaps for people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. I think in a really informative but like accessible kind of way, you do fill in a lot of those gaps. And I'm thinking about like during the time that you've been working on this, and you said that there are other projects you saw come and go and everything. How have you seen like the world kind of shift talking about this topic, and how has it affected your project?
There was a time where I'm like, the crisis is gonna be ended.
Oh God! Oh, that would have been so great if there was no need,
right? Which is like a double-edged sword, right?
Can I talk to you about that though? Like, what was going on at that time where you're like, okay, people are hearing about it. We've got to be like on our way out because like now we know better. What was going on?
Literally, anytime someone else dropped a project, we're like, oh my God, we're never gonna get this project out. People are there's not gonna be a reason for this project after a while. Like, which is in hindsight is kind of silly because nothing is solved that quickly.
Yeah.
We also know that like legislation is taking forever. There's all sorts of things that need to be fixed in this world before, we solve the birth crisis, the Black maternal birth crisis in America. But, you're racing against the clock, it feels like, to get this work out into the world because you care so much about it. You also want to make sure that it's timely. I mean, in the time that we started, it was hardly anybody talking about it or putting out programming. It was stuff here and there to like, you had films that were like done by Ricky Lake, the birth of the business of birth and things like that. And then there was kind of like nothing. And then there were other, there was, and I'm not going to remember the name of the documentary, but another documentary that focused on fathers who were losing their wives in birth. And, you're comparing projects and you're just like, is it too similar to what's already coming out?
Right.
And Roe versus Wade was overturned while we were filming. And just like, all sorts of crazy things. And then, under this new administration, there's a lot, a rollback of tons of women's rights and access. And you're like, we're actually in a worse place than when we started filming.
God. That's horrible.
Which is terrible. And so quite the opposite to what we were thinking. When you're in it and you're creating and you're watching 400 versions of the same scene to make sure you're getting it right and you're panicking like, I got to finish it. And meanwhile, the world is getting worse.
Oh, God. I mean, I agree. There's definitely still the need. It's unfortunate, but there is.
Yeah.
But there definitely is. And you can, just kind of hope like as the stories keep getting told, people are listening and thinking about them in a different way. I wanted to talk to you because I have recently started working as research chair. I'm volunteering as a research chair for maternal mental health now.
That's awesome.
And so I love it. I'm obviously really, care about the subject and everything. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you witnessed as far as like the mental health of like the moms, the doulas, the midwives. We talked about midwifery being needing to be like a calling that people have, and feeling very like deep in yourself. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. What did you notice about like how people took care of their mental health, or how having access to like this emotional support impacted their mental health?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Over the span of 6 years, we followed about 5 different mothers. We were able to capture 2 of the births, but we saw 2 births go to the hospital.
Okay.
And it's interesting to see how the lead up to all of them were different. You don't see the other 2 births because obviously
they were in the hospital.
They were in the hospital, so we weren't able to film them. And by the way, the midwives were still accessible to them, even though their births were in the hospital. So there's something really beautiful about that as well.
Yes.
But I would just say, like, midwives definitely act as a form of therapy, but they are also heavily resourced. And if they feel like something is happening that's deeper than just normal birth concerns, they will refer you to other practitioners who come in and work in partnership with them. And so you can really see that difference when the moms that we follow, like some of them were dealing with some heavier things as a part of their journey into motherhood.
I see.
And the midwives really worked with them to talk out stuff, give them the opportunity to say it out loud, which I think is super valuable in a time where people are rushing to get things done. I think we see a few of those moments. We see, I think there's opportunity, specifically at Kindred Space, we follow, it's a cohort of birthing mothers. So they get to talk to each other and kind of relate in how their births are different or similar. And so, you know, I think the mental load of birth is shared in that space, in that instance, in the way that they're doing it. And I feel like that's something that is invaluable because having people who are in similar life stages as you, who can maybe point out some things that you maybe need to work on or say there's something more serious here, you probably should seek extra help.
Yes.
And having that available to you, readily available to you, I think is really important.
I think so. I mean, you know, we know like so much comes up during like the birthing process, you know, being pregnant and then also the birthing process. So people who have a history of trauma or any kind of other things, you know, that it'll come up, right? Yeah. There's so much emotion. There's all the hormones. There's everything, right? And you're thinking about, I'm bringing this person into the world, you know, what does that mean? And, you know, learning to see yourself, identify yourself as a parent, you know, I think that I would imagine that it's less stigmatizing if that, you know, if people notice that you need additional extra help, but it's coming from people who do know you and care about you, right? Versus someone like, oh, you should talk to someone, like you're a mess, you know? Like, but feeling that, knowing that it's coming from a place of care, I think that does shift things for someone who might be struggling or might need some extra help. So it kind of all folds it together, you know?
Yeah, I think so. And I also would add to that, it's the feeling that it's not someone just, the other side of it is not someone even noticing that something's going on.
Right. No, that's a good point. It's a very good point.
So feeling like, oh, well, if they're taking the time to tell me that this is something more, then I should probably explore it versus maybe you see your OBGYN for 15 minutes every week and they don't even notice that anything's wrong with you at all.
That's such a good point, Randi. I think that's true that it probably just goes missed. And if there was a concern, you may not always feel like you could share it with them anyway.
Exactly.
Right. You know, and so I think that the way that you're talking about and the way that you see in the film, like the cohorts, because then you have like the village, the way we're all supposed to have
100%
that most of us don't have, you know? So you have that. And then you also have this person who's educating you and leading you through the whole process. And when I think about that in terms of like mental health and how so many people feel like isolated, you know, through that process, maybe you're away from your family or maybe you don't have a good relationship with your family or that kind of thing, but just the way that we are supposed to be as people, like in community, and that we often don't get to be.
Exactly. And you'll hear a lot of midwives talk about centering, centering the mothers, centering the community, centering the needs of the birthing family. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's just like making sure that we come to the table with all of the resources for this time in your life to make sure that you have access and support.
Yes, absolutely. And then how does that follow people like once they give birth? How does like still having access to community and that kind of thing? Or what do you think people learn that they need to have once they get through the birthing process?
Honestly, I think it's like midwifery. Again, these birth workers that we followed with Janine and Stephanie and Allegra and Kim, they check on you after you have your baby. They check on your baby after you have the baby. They make sure mom's okay. They make sure the baby's okay. Usually in a hospital setting, mostly it's about the baby. Like I said, they have a garden. So a lot of times people will bring things from the garden and they'll have opportunity to commune over nutrition and things like that. But I also think beyond that, they realize that you can go back to Kindred Space or, Birth Sanctuary or, Southside Birth Center if you need anything ever.
Oh, wow.
And that is something very unique. They can go back and say, Janine, you delivered my baby, but I'm also really feeling off about some of my hormone issues. Or I'm getting older and I'm not really sure if I'm going to ever be able to conceive. Is there something you can talk to me about? And they're always available. They are a wealth of knowledge, and they will be able to help at minimum point you into the right direction.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I just think, that's the way we're all supposed to be, and it's the things we're supposed to have, and we just fall short quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit.
So, Randi, you've said that true stories are evergreen. What did making this film teach you about the kind of stories you want to tell? I'm not assuming that you want to dive back into storytelling. I know this has been like a big project and it's not like it's over, right? But what kind of stories do you want to tell, like either through, creating films, through your work? What have you learned is important to get out there in the world?
I just think storytelling at its core is telling the truth. What I learned is that people want their stories told, but they also want to trust the people who are telling the stories.
Right. You need both. You need both.
And so earning the trust and seeing these women in more vulnerable scenarios, the mothers and the birth workers in some instances, is a gift for me and Jenny, and being able to feel like they trusted us enough to tell their stories truthfully and honestly and with some urgency. And I feel like if I tell more stories and if I'm going to share more, that is got to be where it comes from.
Right. Yes, because this seems to be such an organic project for you. You had your experience. You're like, oh, look, all these people. And then the more you learn, I'm sure the more invested you get into telling the story, the people that you meet. And so that makes sense that to have to spend this time and to spend this energy, like you really need to be connected to the story that you're telling.
And protect it. Because I think, there's lots of propaganda, there's lots of misconceptions, there's misinformation. And so making sure that we're doing justice by telling the story in a way that is narratively impactful. And also people are invested enough to understand why it's important and why these people are just some of the examples of the people doing the work all around the country.
Yes. Okay. Can you, share a little bit more about that protecting the story and the people? How do you go about doing that when, the idea is to get it out there, right? And to share everything that you've experienced so that people do understand the urgency, as you said, the importance, that people can be educated. How do you balance those things, protecting people, because you have made a commitment to them?
Absolutely. It's very hard.
Yeah.
And especially as a Black mother, I felt a very deep protection to make sure that we're telling the truth, but also wonderfully round stories of other Black women who are being vulnerable and opening up,
right.
And making sure that we're protecting what the work that they do, the spirit of why they do it, how they come across on screen, which can be hard because when you're storytelling, also there has to be entertainment,
right?
And so,
yes, exactly.
I was my entire team obviously very aware of it, but I think because my co-producer is Thai and Peruvian. So she's a woman of color, but she's not a Black woman. And so I felt extremely protective of the stories that we were sharing and how we were showing them on screen and making sure that, it didn't feel like we were being exploitative. It didn't feel like we were pushing an agenda. Right. It's hard to do, especially when you start to get funding, because the more people that have their hands in the pot,
the more opinions.
And your creative direction gets a little muddled. We were able to really protect our creative vision. And quite frankly, making a film like this the vision changes all the time, because when we first started, we were like, we're going to tackle the Black maternal crisis in America. And that is so multi-pronged.
Yes, it is. You're right. I mean, that's a big order, right?
And so as you start to get into it, you're like, okay, we have to pick a lane. And then it's hard because everybody wants to see themselves represented. But you can only, 80 minutes sounds like a long time. But we had 300 hours of footage.
Wow.
That we had to cull down to 80 minutes. And in order to tell a cohesive story that actually gives you something to think about on your way out of the film, we really had to narrow that scope.
Yes.
And so that's how we decided to focus on Black midwifery, and specifically out of hospital and centering birth centers.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense, because I can imagine there could be so many different angles that you could come from. But the way that you did tell it, you get to see like a really holistic view of the people, the midwives. You get to see, the birthing moms. You get to see the spaces and like what the kind of like environment, and emotional attention and everything that you're getting. So that seems like a lot of work, but you did it beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really did. Okay, so now, you have this out in the world. Like, what are your hopes, other than people seeing it?
Yeah.
What do you want all of us to learn or to think about things differently as you educate, people about this topic?
I think the number one thing for us is advocacy. Mm-hmm. Being in charge of your care and understanding that if you don't like something, you can say, and being with people who care and have your priorities first in their mission and your journey for birth. Showing the level of care that midwifery as a practice offers, but especially freestanding birth centers. Showing how Black women show up for everybody all the time. And in a crisis that's killing primarily Black women, that Black women are taking the initiative to make the change and be the change. And really just like seeking out your local community birthing centers, practicing doulas in your area, helping to fund them if you can, amplifying whatever they're doing, making sure that people know that there is an option and they're available and they're practicing with care and intention.
Yeah. And I think you're, going into that a little bit about the funding, because what is then, do you see as the responsibility of the people who are not birthing anymore? Maybe they had children already or don't plan to have children, or, people who can't have, like, what do you see as society's responsibility once we have this knowledge?
I think society's role is to come together as a collective to help to solve the crisis as a whole. And like I said earlier, midwifery is a part of that solution, a beautiful part of that solution, but there are other things that need to change. And so understanding that what care can look like in a scenario where mothers are protected should be a catalyst for everybody to care about how solving this crisis in America will help to keep all mothers safe.
Yes. I love that. I think that's really important, because I think sometimes people can look at something and be like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Oh, that's terrible. Or someone should really do something about that. But I think that you really, express that very succinctly. Like we all can play a role, and it's good for everyone.
Absolutely.
Even if you look at this and you don't see anyone who looks like you, doesn't mean it doesn't matter to you.
That's right.
It doesn't mean it's not going to, change all of our lives for the better 100%. To have that education.
And we focus on Black midwives and Black mothers in this film, but there are all sorts of ethnicities of midwives, excuse me. And so we're focused in this one lane, but it spans the world.
Yes.
And so the care is the care. And, we're focusing on Black midwives because Black mothers are dying at a disproportionate rate.
Yes.
But there are stories of all mothers who are facing critical and terrible circumstances around birth around this country, and anything that we can do to help protect them is the right thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Really beautiful, very important film. Like incredible work that you've done, Randi.
We're super proud of it.
You should be. You really should be. It's really incredible. If people want to find out more about what you're working on and to find out more about the film, where you're going to festivals and all of those kinds of things, where can they find you on social?
So Deliver Us Doc is on social, and my personal is Making Moves Matthews.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for
really
having me.
Incredible conversation.
I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. Thank
Me
you so
too.
much.
Thank you, Randi. For more on what I'm doing, you can follow me on TikTok or Instagram at Dr. Patrice Lagoy. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe, and also would love to hear feedback or ideas for future shows. Thank you for listening.